I thought about the fact that vision leaks.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just the reality of casting vision is why do we cast and recast, right? Because vision leaks. That's just part of working for an organization, for profit or nonprofit.
Yep.
I think encouragement leaks.
Yeah.
I think we have moments where encouragement is something that we're giving and we're getting. And, it reminds me of the whole cup analysis. I've got one in front of me with coffee in it, right? Where you got a hole in the cup and it's constantly dripping out, right?
Yeah.
If somebody's not pouring back into your cup, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Working with the local church to take the hope of Christ to every student in the United States. This is First Priority. Now here are your hosts, Steve Cherrico and Brad Schelling.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. My name is Steve Cherrico, and this is my frenemy, Brad Schelling.
Welcome.
Hey, Brad.
It's good to be here.
It is great to be here.
What's going on today?
Well, should we start with the obvious?
The new First Priority podcast studio.
One word, Brad. Say it loud.
Jesus.
No, Tayana this time.
Tayana. Yes. Well, you said one word, not one person.
Well,
Threw me off a little. Although I did say Jesus too.
A name is a word. Thank
Right?
you. Well done.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
Yes.
So mad props to Tayana.
That's right.
For the new space.
New space.
And those of you that are only listening and not watching, A, you're bad.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot going on you should be aware of.
Yep.
And B, it's on YouTube. It's easy.
It is. Very
It's
easy. YouTube.com/FP of America.
Oh my gosh, that's easy.
It is easy.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well, we're glad you're here today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
We've got a great show today.
You got a story for us to get us started?
Well, I do. You want to jump in just like that?
We can jump in just like that. We can tell them what we're going to talk about, but
So this one's hot off the fryer.
okay.
Like it literally just happened in a discussion this morning.
But I'm eating healthy today.
Well, but fried food is always the tastiest food.
Always good food.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So out of the East Tennessee district,
Okay.
which is who I was talking to this morning,
Yep.
they launched in an area they weren't ready to launch in. And let me preempt that with, they knew it was coming.
Yeah.
They had told the story. They had done the work. They just thought, January.
Sure.
And the students came back and said, nada, we're starting now.
Nice.
So
I love it.
they launched their club, and actually two clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And the first club that launched, the very first meeting had 80 plus students in
Wow.
it, which they didn't expect.
Right?
And so the kid there just decided, I'm sharing the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
We got an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And 12 kids responded to the gospel and made decisions for Christ.
Nice.
7 of those have been followed up on already.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus is alive and well on the high school campus.
I love it.
So when people say that God's not there on the middle school and high school campus, you are welcome
Yeah.
to evangelize that story and tell it often.
You're setting us up for the show, aren't you?
Oh, am I?
You're encouraging, you're equipping, you're evangelizing.
Yeah. So let's talk about why
Yes.
we're here. Why are we here?
Why are we here?
Yeah. Why did Tayana spend the time on and creating this incredible space?
Well, she wanted to change the whole show. She didn't get to the hosts quite yet, but she's working on it.
I feel like that's appropriate in a lot of ways.
It is. I'm not sure where to go with that.
Well,
Other than to be honest and say, hurry up, Tayana.
Yeah, exactly. The host these poor people have listened for 3.5 years
Right?
to the same two guys.
Exactly.
All right. So
We're going to talk about why are we doing this?
Yeah,
like
good.
we're setting up a new place. Some of that had to do with, obviously, we hired a few people in the office, so we're moving things around.
Yep.
So let's take the opportunity.
Yep.
If you haven't been to the offices in Nashville for a while, we want to invite you over here. Come check it out. You're in Nashville ever?
Well, there's a good opportunity
know.
because
Mhm.
National Conference is coming up really quick.
It's true. A couple weeks.
So if you do come in town, we are expecting you to stop by
Yeah,
the office space.
Yeah.
Get a grand tour.
that's right.
Sit inside the podcast room for a minute.
That'd be great.
Ask Tiana to start recording
Yeah,
when we have them sit in the podcast room.
that's right. There we go.
Yes.
You can record a few shows while we're here.
So yeah, you're exactly right.
Yep.
Keep going.
So yeah, national conference. Looking forward to seeing everybody.
Yep.
But just trying to, we want to take this moment just to say, yeah, why do we do the podcast? What is our end goal? Who are we trying to reach?
Good.
Just kind of take a moment to reset while we reset up a new place.
Good.
And yeah, it's a new studio, a new thing. You might notice what's behind us here.
You going to talk about the scoreboard already?
We want to talk about the scoreboard.
Go ahead, do it. I like it.
Part of the reason we do this is to cast vision. What is First Priority doing around America, right? Steve tells the story of East Tennessee. We have Warren out raising funds. Mark is working on its expansion. How do we start new in the districts? You've been hearing a lot about that lately.
Yeah.
and just putting it up in front of us, right behind us, actually, in front of you, the listener, and saying, hey, where are we going? Where can we be in prayer for First Priority as we look to expand? And so, yeah, you'll see there on that board that San Antonio is the first on the list. You may or may not have heard that a couple weeks ago, we had a luncheon in the Petroleum Club, San Antonio, Texas.
And not a small luncheon. You had a bunch of people in the room.
Yeah, there was 45, 50 people in the room. Shane and Natalie came down from Permian Basin, told their story, told what First Priority was about. I think that was on the podcast last week. I looked over at Tayana in the studio to say,
giving stuff away about the studio, right? Brad, keep going.
And yeah, it was just a great day. And Warren is following up with those relationships these following weeks and just saying, hey, can we get San Antonio started with First Priority?
It's really good. So to surmise, where Brad and I are today is just really talking about the why. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? Why would we give the most valuable asset that we have, which is our time, to this discussion? And so let's jump into the why for a minute.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about the 3 E's from back in the day. Those of you who are longtime folks with us, there are 3 E's that we used to use way back in the day before the axe and fish and all that came together. So what's our first E?
Encourage.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's part of why we tell a story. Story time with Steve is to encourage us, right? We hear stories. We're on each other's email lists a lot. You know, we get the emails from Birmingham or South Florida or Nashville or wherever they may come from. And it's just encouraging to know that we're not alone in this movement.
That's good.
And so we want to get on once a week and just tell the story. We've heard that quite a bit of people, different staffers who are like, yeah, I woke up this morning a little bit discouraged, but I turned on the podcast, heard a story, and it got me going again. So
when you were talking about vision, I thought about the fact that vision leaks.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just the reality of casting vision is why do we cast and recast, right? Because vision leaks. That's just part of working for an organization, for profit or nonprofit. I think encouragement leaks. I think we have moments where encouragement is something that we're giving and we're getting. And, again, it reminds me of the whole cup analysis. I've got one in front of me with coffee in it, right? Where you got a hole in the cup and it's constantly dripping out, right? If somebody's not pouring back into your cup, you're in trouble. And so numero uno on this, and you and I making fun of each other because we're good friends and have been for a long time, right? And we'll continue to. Poor Tayana has to live through that. She's like, are you sure? But exactly. So encouragement is one of those things that leaks. And so we need moments where we're hearing that God's doing stuff. And P.S., by the way, one of the things you hear from us at the end of the podcast is we need your 5-star reviews. We need you to speak up about ideas of discussions. And frankly, we need your stories. We need to hear about what God is doing in your community, in your chapter, in your district, in your city, that we can tell that story because this is happening all over the U.S.
And can I take this moment to say we're going to try not to do this on a podcast this school year, that it's just the two of us talking, but we want your story. We want to get you on the show and interview you. You might say, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. Well, usually it's just who you are, where you are, why do you do First Priority, and tell us a story from your area and, how you would encourage. So it's pretty simple, pretty basic. We want to get you on there to encourage. And then the second part.
Hang on before you do. Hang on, because I have a thought. Right? He's right. Epic this year's foundations. What makes First Priority, and please hear this, our best asset is our people.
It is. You
as the staff, you as the volunteers, you as student leaders, that's the best thing we have going for First Priority. When we talk to outside organizations and you talk about, well, what is First Priority? And they start telling the story from their perspective, they talk about our people. They talk about our people in Fort Lauderdale. They talk about our people in other parts of the country. So just before you jump into number 2, I want you to be encouraged. When we have conversations across the country about what God's doing with First Priority, it's about you. On the campus level, on the network level, and on the staff level, it's about you.
So that's one of the things I love about First Priority the most is the people, and that we all bring our gifts to the table. I commonly share some of the same names a lot, but I think of Amber Johansson and how she did fight a big legal battle a while back, and they never went to court. And I say that it was a lot of legal language, a lot of legal conversations. They talked to lawyers, letters, students' rights, all that kind of stuff. But she has come to a point where she is that expert without taking the bar exam for us. Rachel Gardner, who doesn't get spoken of a lot on the podcast, North Carolina. She wrote the material that we have this week, the foundation material. She was the original author of it, and bringing that gift. She was an English teacher, right? Rising campus coach, teacher sponsor, become an executive director, rising, I guess, up the ranks, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, but changing roles and bringing that gift to the table. Chris and Fred are off in the strat ops. Let's strategic operations. What do we need to do to make this thing a machine? And just roll with it. And they've gotten to several hundred campuses because of that, so everybody brings that gifting to the table, and we're better because of each other, even though that sometimes may cause us to be like, pointing fingers and they don't see it this way or that way. But together we are stronger because of everybody's gifts and abilities.
Which leads us to the second part of this, which is we are here to equip.
Yes.
Right. Not just on the layer of between the two of us, about 28 years of staff influence, but also longer than that when we were volunteers.
Yep.
But also the layer of, as you just said, for the rest of the year, our goal for the rest of the school year is to bring staff from all over the country here and equip one another with our giftings.
Yeah. Well, and as we interview, so to dig into what we're going to attempt to do, many are the plans of a man's heart and they don't always prevail, but what we want to do is to bring people in, interview them, talk to them, and see what part of First Priority rises to the surface. And then, in our follow-up at the end, say, this is the nugget that we can say, here's a truth about First Priority, a principle, a core value, personnel value, whatever the case might be, that, hey, they're eager to learn. And that's one of our core values, is that we're always learning. And so we want to dig into that just for a moment afterwards. So it's encouraging through the people and their stories, but equipping as well to say, here's who we are as a group, and share that with those around the country.
Really good. And it reminds me of, First Priority of America's goal is to reach a staffer 3 times a year, right? It would be face-to-face with them at least 3 times a year. And it reminds me that that's not enough.
It's not,
right? And so in these moments where we come to things that are spring meetings or national conferences and the fire hose is open and we're intaking and we're note-taking and we're working through that. And you've got those breakouts, and picking on Tim Bargo for a minute from East Kentucky, out of Tri-County. Tim Bargo is going to share at the national conference, right?
Yeah.
But having Tim then later in the year share about something else is going to help remind us of things that we learned in the midst of that, right? It's just repeating and reflecting on what we've discussed before, because the fire hose open is tough to take all of that home and actually activate it into something. So here's another why. Hey, jump back on here and be reminded what the Lord reminded you of in the midst of that teaching or that discussion on what God can do in your community.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons, a little bit of a side note to the podcast. Obviously, the podcast is designed to encourage, equip us while we're away from each other.
You can say empower. You can say empower. That's the last one.
Evangelize.
Keep going.
We do want that to happen. So we've started the podcast 4 years ago for that reason, right? I was driving back from JD Simpson's golf scramble, and I'm like, man, we need to just shout all this stuff from the rooftops. And a podcast is a platform that we can use to do that.
Exactly right.
And so, but the spring meetings and the fall conference, and then First Priority of America coming to your community at least one time that year is our ideal. That's what we shoot for.
That's right.
With few of us on the national team, it's hard to get to 25 different places every year, but
it's better now than it's ever been before. And I can say that out loud without much worry, right? It's better now. It's more strategic than it's ever been before. We're taking better opportunities.
Yeah.
No, we're taking advantage of the opportunities in the communities, right? I mean, there you go. Which leads us to empower. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, why don't you get started?
All right. Well, so empowering is the big deal where we actually activate. We give enough of the equipping, enough of the encouraging that we actually activate. We begin to hear stories of where God is doing something through a lesson learned in another community. Again, language that has been used as long as I've been around this movement. When Benny sat across at a table with a napkin, right? Way back in the day, language that's been used as the best part of First Priority is the local.
Yeah.
The more local it is, the more locally owned it is, the better off it is. So when we hear the stories from a local, it then equips and empowers the national to repeat that and to do it better.
Yeah.
we're BASF, right?
Yep.
We're not always the one that creates, but we take that tool
Yep.
and we BASF it and we make it better.
Yep.
For those of you who are not old enough to know what that is, don't worry about it. But for those of us that know that commercial, right? So we take that tool, we expand on it, we tweak it, and we make it something that everybody can use.
That's right. Well, and ultimately it's the students can use, right?
Yeah,
In your
that's
mind,
good.
when you're talking about empowerment, we want to empower you. But when we talk about legal things, even you get into that conversation, first priority does have no right to be on the school.
Yep.
It's the students that have the right to be on the school. So we are a resource organization, and we're talking strategy, we're talking gospel, we're talking
good.
student-led and local church engaged. We want to empower that local church
Yep.
to send their students onto the school as missionaries, because they are the ones that have the power. They have the freedom of speech and assembly, right? So when we empower, it's empowering all the way down, right? And it's a tension for us at First Party of America, because we talk about building an organization and expansion, and you're raising money, and our conversations on our staff meetings go, well, we need to raise money there because that's going to help us get to the next place and the next place. And there is some power that goes with that, if you want to use the worldly sense of that.
Yep.
But ultimately, we need to keep that with an open hand, because number one, the money's not ours in the first place, it's God's.
Yep.
But it's not ours. We can't do anything. We have to empower the student and hand it to the student and say, this is your First Amendment right. Will you go into the school and share the love of Jesus with your peers?
Yeah, really good.
Right. And it's
Really
that
good.
both end of extremes that we're talking about when we talk about empowering.
So as we land the plane of the podcast, that really leaves me with, there are 3 layers to the podcast on the why, right? There's the staff level, which we hear from on a fairly regular basis.
Yep.
There's the volunteer level, which surprisingly we hear from more than I think I would expect, because
Okay.
a lot of the volunteers, man, their plate's full.
Yeah.
And that hour per week is that they're really giving to make that work, right? But then you've got those few student leaders that when you do the scholarship thing each year,
Sure.
it's fun, right?
Yeah,
that
yeah.
grows a little bit.
Yep.
But on a regular, you've got those few student leaders that you think, that's probably future staff. Like, they're probably going to take my job someday.
Yeah.
So it's fun to listen to and to think about the layers of influence that the podcast can have when it's used to its fullest effect.
Yeah. I agree. You just throw it out there that, Mark Robbins is looking for the succession plan. So any student leaders out there that want to be the president of First Party of America, now's your chance. Jump in.
If I think she's already hired, is that okay?
Sure. Are you talking about Tiana again?
Not this time.
Not
but
this time?
Tiana could certainly be that person, but I
Okay.
wasn't talking about her
Okay.
this time. But
Okay.
yeah, I think that person's already hired. We just got a little time.
All right. I have no idea who you're talking about.
That's okay. That's good. I like it. I like that you're a little confused at the moment.
I've been walking blind all my life, so
There you go.
I'll keep walking blind.
Well, I think that's a wrap.
I think so too.
I think that's a good just summation of where we're headed, where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
Those of you who are just listening and not online would love to see you online again. And those of you that are our faithful listeners, thank you. Continue to 5-star, continue to share it, continue to help us tell the story
Yep.
as this thing grows. And I can just tell you, it's growing.
And if you do have a story, let's invite them in. Brad at fpofamerica.com or Steve at fpofamerica.com.
Either one will work.
Love to get you on Zoom and have you tell your story. Love to invite you into the office and have you tell your story as well. So if you're interested, we would love to have you.
Good job today, Brad.
You as well.
Well done.
Yeah.
Till next time, everybody.
Have a great week.